Hello and welcome to the Beyond Fortune channel. Here you'll find moving stories of love, resilience, and destiny, written to touch your heart and remind you that even the most unlikely encounters can change everything. Today we bring you another narrative filled with emotion, tension, and romance. A story that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. So make yourself comfortable, get ready to dive into this journey, and don't forget, subscribe now to the channel. Hit the notification bell, like this video, and share it with someone special. Because here, every story is a reminder that true love goes far beyond fortune. The night in Boston was unusually quiet, except for the wind rattling against the windows of the old building where Maggie lived. The narrow hallway, with its flickering weak bulbs, looked like the set of a suspense movie. Maggie, a freelance journalist always buried under bills, sat curled up on her couch, watching a crime documentary. Every grim detail made her heart race. She lived alone, and on that rainy night, the silence felt more threatening than usual. At the top of the same building, Andrew Hale, a tech industry millionaire, was wrapping up a video meeting that had dragged on longer than he wanted. Exhausted, he shut his laptop and grabbed a coat. An old friend had recently moved to the floor below and invited him for a quick drink. Distracted, still with his phone pressed to his ear, Andrew stepped into the elevator and descended, unaware that in his mind he was punching in the wrong apartment number. Maggie yawned, trying to shake off the paranoia the documentary had stirred, when she suddenly heard the slow turn of her doorknob. Her body froze. "No, it can't be," she whispered, her heartbeat pounding so loud it seemed to echo through the room. The creak of the door filled the tiny apartment. Someone was coming in. And it wasn't her neighbor. The woman always knocked 3 times. Before anything else, the door opened, revealing the shadow of a tall man with broad shoulders, carrying a glass bottle. His silhouette stretched across the dim hallway light, making Maggie believe she was face to face with a burglar, or worse, a dangerous intruder. The documentary still playing on the TV was showing a robbery scene, only amplifying her panic. Without thinking twice, Maggie dashed to the kitchen, her bare feet slapping against the cold floor. She yanked open a drawer and grabbed the first weapon she could find, a cast-iron skillet. Her hands trembled, but her eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and determination. If that man meant to hurt her, he would have to go through her first. Andrew walked in casually, still on the phone, convinced he was in the right apartment. "Yeah, Mason, I'm here already. Let's toast to this new project," he said distractedly. As he spoke, he wandered further inside, adjusted his tie, and set the bottle on the coffee table. Only then did he notice sudden movement from the kitchen. "Stop right there," Maggie shouted, raising the skillet above her head like a sword. Her voice shook, but it was firm enough to freeze Andrew mid-step. He raised his hands, bewildered. "What?" he muttered, just as Maggie lunged. The heavy skillet struck his arm, making him groan in pain. "What do you think you're doing? Breaking into my apartment?" Maggie screamed, her breath ragged. Stunned, Andrew dropped his phone, which hit the rug with a dull thud. "Breaking in? I think there's been a mistake," he tried to explain, taking a step back. But Maggie was in full survival mode. The second blow landed on his shoulder, sending the wine bottle rolling off the rug and shattering against the table leg. Andrew threw up his arms to defend himself, shocked. "Wait, I'm not a thief," he said firmly. But all Maggie could hear was the echo of her own adrenaline. The third swing nearly hit his head, but Andrew caught the skillet just in time. His eyes locked onto hers. Breathless, Maggie finally saw his face lit by the glow of the TV. Her eyes widened in disbelief. This wasn't just some criminal. It was the man who graced the covers of business magazines. "Oh my God," Maggie whispered, dropping the skillet. "You're Andrew Hale." The millionaire exhaled heavily, rubbing his aching shoulder. "Yes, and apparently, I'm also your personal punching bag." The sarcasm only deepened her embarrassment. The silence that followed was broken only by the drip of wine soaking into the carpet. Maggie's cheeks burned as she scrambled for words. I thought you were a burglar who just walks into someone's apartment without knocking." Andrew raised a brow, still incredulous. "Who leaves their door unlocked in Boston?" he shot back dryly. She folded her arms, defensive. "I was home alone. I didn't think some eccentric millionaire would be tonight's intruder." Andrew sighed, retrieving his phone from the floor. I came down to meet my friend Mason. Looks like I hit the wrong door. His eyes scanned Maggie's small apartment. Simple, cozy, a far cry from the lavish places he was used to. And, do you always greet guests like this? Only the ones who barge in uninvited, Maggie retorted, trying to regain her composure. Her heart was still racing, though guilt was starting to creep in. Are you okay? Andrew glanced at his sore shoulder and winced. Nothing a few days of physical therapy won't fix. Despite the tension, Maggie let out a nervous laugh. Sorry, it's just that you really looked like a thief. Tall, in a suit, holding a bottle. That's not exactly a friendly entrance. Andrew gave a dry chuckle. So now being tall and bringing wine is a crime? The awkwardness hung between them, though something in Andrew's steady gaze made it clear he wasn't going to let this misunderstanding slide so easily. You know this could be considered assault, right? He said, arching a brow. Maggie's face went pale. Assault? I was defending myself. Andrew stepped closer, and Maggie instinctively backed away. Relax, I'm not calling the police. But, he paused, almost theatrically. Maybe there's another way you can make up for this memorable evening. Maggie's eyes widened. Another way? What do you mean by that? A sly smile tugged at his lips. I haven't decided yet, but I can promise you, it won't be simple. Maggie crossed her arms, masking her nerves. Great. A mysterious millionaire threatening the innocent neighbor. That would make a great headline. You're a journalist, aren't you? Andrew asked suddenly, noticing the scattered papers and the laptop open with article drafts. Maggie hesitated, then admitted, yes, investigative. And no, I'm not writing about this fiasco. He only smiled, as if a brilliant idea had just crossed his mind. Silence filled the apartment again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, charged, almost electric. Maggie felt her knees weaken, not from terror, but from an odd awareness of his presence. Andrew straightened his coat and said in a low voice, I think tonight was just the beginning, Maggie. And without asking permission, he walked out, leaving her breathless, heart racing, and certain her life had just changed forever. The next morning, Maggie was still tossing in bed, replaying the scene from the night before. Every detail came back like a slow-motion film. The shadow at the door, the skillet raised high, the well-aimed blows, and finally Andrew Hale stunned. Face on her living room floor. She buried her face in the pillow and muttered, Well done, Maggie. First meeting with the millionaire neighbor, and you already assaulted him with cookware. When she finally worked up the courage to get up, she heard a firm knock at the door. Her heart froze. For a second, she thought it might be the police. Swallowing hard, she opened the door cautiously, and, to her surprise, there he was, Andrew, impeccably dressed, as if nothing had happened. The only evidence of the chaotic night was the discreet bandage on his forehead. His cold, calculating gaze made Maggie take a step back. Good morning, violent neighbor, Andrew said dryly, arms crossed. Maggie opened her mouth to reply, but he didn't give her the chance. We need to talk. Without asking permission, he walked into the small apartment once again, taking up the space as if it belonged to him. Maggie huffed. You really have a thing for barging in uninvited, don't you? And you have a thing for attacking innocent people, Andrew countered, giving her a look that said he held all the cards. Maggie sighed and pointed at the couch. Fine, sit. But let me warn you, I don't have money for lawyers if you decide to sue me. Andrew settled in, his suit falling perfectly over his broad shoulders. I'm glad you mentioned that. About compensation, I have some ideas. Maggie's eyes widened. Compensation? I already apologized. 3 times. Actually, Andrew raised a brow. Apologies don't erase bruises. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You have 2 options. First, I sue you for assault, which would definitely ruin your professional and financial life. Second, you accept a small deal with me. Oh, perfect, Maggie said sarcastically. You sound like a cheap soap opera villain. And what's the second option? Becoming your maid. Andrew's lips curved in a sly smile. Something like that. I need a temporary assistant. Someone to take care of tedious tasks I don't have time for. And you, Maggie, seem like the perfect candidate. She nearly choked on her own breath. You want me to work for you? I'm a journalist, not a secretary. Andrew studied her with calm irritation, then picked the first option. I'm sure the courts would love to hear how you attacked an innocent man with a skillet. Maggie clenched her fists, anger boiling. You're impossible. I'm pragmatic, Andrew corrected. And in a way, I'm giving you the chance to turn your impulsiveness into something useful. Maggie jumped up, pacing across the room. This is pure blackmail. You know that, don't you? He shrugged, indifferent. Call it whatever you like. I prefer the term fair deal. Maggie stopped and glared at him. And if I agree to this madness, for how long? Andrew pretended to think. 1 week. She scoffed. Just 1 week? And after that, you'll never mention this disaster again. He tilted his head, his gray eyes glinting with challenge. Millionaire's promise. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant noise from the street. Maggie sighed, feeling cornered. Fine, but know that I'm not happy about this. Andrew smiled in satisfaction. Excellent. I knew you'd be reasonable. He stood, adjusting his jacket. I'll be expecting you at 9 sharp in the penthouse. Don't be late. Penthouse, Maggie repeated, as if the word carried extra weight. She had never set foot on the top floor, except to envy the glow of lights through its luxurious windows. Andrew noticed her look and lifted his chin. My home. Consider it your new temporary office. When he left, Maggie collapsed onto the couch, exasperated. What did I do to deserve this? She thought about all the articles she needed to finish, the overdue bills, the routine of cold coffee and sleepless nights. Now, on top of everything, she was going to be the personal assistant of an arrogant millionaire. 1 week. Just 1 week. She repeated like a mantra. The following morning, Maggie struggled to choose an outfit that didn't scream financial failure. She finally went with simple black pants and a white blouse, trying to look professional. Staring at her reflection, she muttered, hopefully he doesn't expect heels and a power suit. I don't have the money or the patience for that. The elevator crawled to the top floor, Maggie's heart pounding with every lit number. When the doors opened, it felt like stepping into another world. Andrew's apartment looked like a blend of art gallery and 5-star hotel. Massive glass windows showcased the city below, while minimalist furniture exuded discreet luxury. Finally, Andrew said, appearing with a cup of coffee in hand. He wasn't wearing a tie, but still looked flawless. I thought you'd backed out. Maggie lifted her chin. Is it too late? He smirked. Sorry, you're already hired. Welcome to the marble and glass hell. He handed her a heavy folder. Here are the first tasks. Review documents, organize appointments, and Maggie's jaw dropped. Buy birthday presents for your mother? You've got to be kidding. Andrew arched an eyebrow. No, my mother has very specific expectations. Let's see if you're creative. I'm a journalist, not a personal shopper. Maggie protested. Andrew shrugged. Consider it part of the training. If you can handle my mother, you can handle anyone. Maggie glared at him, incredulous. You really enjoy torturing me, don't you? He gave the faintest smile. A little. Despite how absurd it felt, Maggie got to work. She read contracts, answered emails, organized deadlines. Slowly, she noticed Andrew watching her with more attention than necessary. You're quick, he remarked in a neutral tone. She shot him a sarcastic look. Surprise. I know how to read. As the morning went on, Maggie realized there was more behind Andrew's cold facade. He spoke little, but listened closely when she muttered complaints. At one point, he even laughed quietly at one of her jokes, rare for a man known for his stone-faced demeanor. It left her unsettled by nightfall. Maggie left the apartment exhausted, her mind spinning. A week as Andrew Hale's assistant already felt like an eternity. Still, something inside her whispered this wouldn't just be punishment. It was the start of something unexpected, and though she refused to admit it, she could hardly wait for their next encounter. The following days passed like a whirlwind for Maggie. Against her will, she was slowly adapting to the chaotic routine Andrew imposed. A packed schedule, meetings that needed summaries, endless emails, tasks ranging from choosing an overpriced bottle of wine to reviewing legal documents that looked like they were written in another language. Despite her initial resistance, Maggie surprised herself with how efficient she could be. Andrew, on the other hand, remained a mystery. Always composed, stern, and unreadable, yet every so often he let slip a dry comment that managed to make her laugh. Those fleeting moments of humor were like tiny cracks in his wall of ice. Maggie couldn't help her curiosity. Who was the man hiding behind that impenetrable exterior? One afternoon, while reviewing a stack of contracts in his minimalist office, Maggie noticed a cardboard box tucked discreetly beside the bookshelf. Curious, she leaned over to peek inside. They weren't confidential documents or business awards. Inside were children's books, board games, and colorful boxes of crayons. Maggie frowned, puzzled. Before she could look any further, Andrew walked in. "Prying where you shouldn't?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Maggie swallowed hard and tried to defend herself. "I just thought it was strange to see toys in the home of a man who barely smiles." He stepped closer, eyes hard. Lesson 1. Maggie, curiosity can be dangerous. She crossed her arms, defiant. "I'm a journalist. Being curious is my job." Andrew stared at her for several seconds before sighing and stepping back. "Then control the instinct. Not everything you see here is meant to be published or discussed." Maggie bit her lip, intrigued. It wasn't just about the box of toys. It felt like he was hiding something bigger. That night, as she left the apartment, Maggie jotted in her personal notebook, "Mysterious toys. A man who avoids talking about the past. Secret midnight agenda." It all sounded like the start of a serious investigation. Yet something inside her whispered that this wasn't just about work anymore. Days later, while organizing Andrew's schedule, she noticed some nights marked only with the word reserved. No place, no contact, no details. "What does this mean?" she asked, handing him the planner. Andrew slowly lifted his gaze. "It means it's none of your business." Maggie narrowed her eyes, frustrated. "If I'm your assistant, I should know where you'll be." "What if it's a secret date with a hidden girlfriend?" she teased. Andrew raised a brow and, for a split second, the corner of his lips almost curved into a smile. "And if it were? Would you be jealous, Maggie?" Her cheeks burned as she looked away. "Of course not. I just don't want to be caught off guard." Later, in the building's hallway, Maggie spotted Andrew slipping out discreetly. No driver, no security, only a dark coat. The clock read 2 in the morning. She held her breath, watching from a distance as he disappeared into the night. A chill ran down her spine. Where would a millionaire go, alone, at that hour? The next morning, Andrew looked tired, but no one mentioned his secret outing. Maggie, however, couldn't resist. "Living a double life, Hale?" she asked, masking her curiosity with a playful tone. He answered only with a cutting look. "You should worry more about your reports than my nights." Yet his silence was more revealing than any explanation. The air between them wavered between sparks of humor and mounting tension. Maggie discovered that Andrew could be incredibly infuriating, but also dangerously intriguing. He challenged her, provoked her, and yet there were moments when his gaze softened, carrying a weight no one else seemed to see. Those glimpses disarmed her completely. One of those moments came at a business dinner. Andrew brought her along as his assistant, but during the event his eyes wandered, distracted. Maggie noticed he seemed uninterested in the flattery and the forced greetings. In the parking lot afterward, Andrew muttered, "Everyone smiles, but none of them really care. I'd rather have silence than lies." Maggie said nothing, moved by the unexpected honesty. Back home, she reflected on his words. It was almost a confession, hidden in a few sentences. For the first time, Maggie felt her role as assistant was shifting into something deeper. She was stepping into Andrew's private world, a space no one else seemed to know. A space built on secrets, silence, and unspoken pain. Still, her journalist's instinct grew louder. One afternoon, while sorting through files, she found an old letter carefully folded. It was addressed to Andrew Hale and signed simply Clara. Just a few short lines. "You promised you'd be here. I waited, but you never came. Goodbye." Before she could read it again, Andrew stormed into the room and snatched the letter from her hands. His gray eyes burned with restrained fury. "I told you not to touch what isn't yours." Maggie tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. The atmosphere thickened, and for the first time, she saw in his face not just coldness, but pain. "Who's Clara?" she dared to ask, her voice soft but steady. Andrew turned away, staring out the window. "Someone who doesn't matter anymore." His flat tone, however, betrayed the opposite. Maggie realized she had brushed against an old wound. His arrogant image was beginning to crack before her eyes. The prolonged silence between them made Maggie think. Maybe the toys, the midnight outings, and now the letter were all pieces of a larger puzzle. Andrew wasn't just a cold millionaire. He was a man scarred by the past. And though he tried to hide it, his fractures were starting to show. That night, writing in her journal, Maggie noted, Andrew Hale, a wall of secrets, a double life between luxury and shadows. The most difficult man I've ever met. And yet, every detail I uncover only pulls me deeper into this mystery. She slammed the notebook shut, as if to keep her own feelings in check. Meanwhile, Andrew, alone in his luxurious apartment, held the crumpled letter in his hands. His eyes drifted over the glowing city, but his mind was elsewhere, another time, another place. The name Clara still weighed on him like an unhealed wound. And deep down, he knew Maggie was getting far too close to the truth. Fate was beginning to weave their lives together inescapably. Maggie, with her relentless need to uncover everything, and Andrew, with his fierce desire to keep the world at arm's length. They were locked in a game of secrets and revelations. What Maggie didn't yet realize was that this mystery wouldn't just draw her closer to Andrew, it would also put her in danger. Maggie arrived early at Andrew's apartment that morning. The tension from the letter incident still lingered, but she decided to act as if nothing had happened. Adjusting her bag on her shoulder, she took a deep breath before pressing the doorbell. When the door opened, Andrew was already dressed for work, impeccable as always, though his eyes carried a hidden weariness. Punctual today, surprising, he remarked dryly. Maggie rolled her eyes. I don't want to give you another reason to sue me. The tension between them hovered in the air like a storm cloud. Despite the sharp words, she couldn't ignore the vulnerability she had glimpsed the night before. Clara's letter still echoed in her mind. While arranging the day's schedule, Maggie couldn't resist her curiosity. You're never going to tell me who Clara was, are you? Andrew froze for a second, pen suspended in midair. No, he replied curtly, returning to his writing. Maggie sighed. So you'll just keep burying the weight of your secrets until you explode. He shot her a cutting look. It's none of your business. The harsh answer should have ended the conversation, but deep down, Andrew seemed to be fighting himself. His tense shoulders, clenched jaw, and eyes that shifted away too quickly gave him away. Maggie realized he wasn't just arrogant. He was a man at war with his own memory. The realization left her more intrigued, but also more cautious. That afternoon, they attended an important investors' meeting together. Andrew commanded the room with his firm posture and deep voice, but Maggie, seated beside him, noticed the stiffness in his movements. It was as if he were holding up the weight of the world alone. Between one statement and the next, his gaze drifted for brief moments, revealing cracks in the armor on the way back. Silence filled the car until Maggie finally broke it. You can fool everyone in there, but not me. Andrew turned his head, surprised. And what exactly do you think you see? She inhaled deeply. A man carrying far more than he should, hiding behind sarcasm. He said nothing. Back at the penthouse, Maggie once again noticed the box of toys. Unable to resist, she picked up one of the coloring books and flipped through it. On the inside, cover was a scribbled note. For those who never had a childhood, may these bring smiles to others. Maggie's chest tightened. It was hard to connect those words with the cold man she faced every day. Andrew walked in suddenly, catching her in the act. His eyes hardened. I told you not to touch that. Maggie closed the book quickly. Andrew, this isn't just about you. It's about the people you help, isn't it? He hesitated, exhaled, and ran a hand through his hair. Some things don't need to be said out loud. She stepped toward him, but they need to be felt. Don't you see that hiding who you really are only increases the distance between you and the rest of the world? Andrew looked away, visibly unsettled. The world doesn't need to know. Maggie held his gaze. Maybe not the whole world, but someone does. The silence grew so heavy Maggie could hear her own heartbeat. For a moment, Andrew looked as though he might speak, but he held back. Instead, he handed her another folder of tasks. Focus on this, not on my wounds. Frustrated, Maggie took the folder but stored every detail in her mind. He was hiding something, and she was getting closer. That evening, as she left the apartment, Maggie ran into an elderly neighbor in the hallway. The woman said casually, "It's nice to see Andrew getting visits. He's lived alone for years, ever since he lost someone dear." Maggie froze. Lost who? But the neighbor just smiled and walked on, leaving her with more questions than answers. Back home, Maggie sat at her laptop determined to piece the puzzle together. She searched through old articles about Andrew Hale. She found stories about his meteoric rise in business, glossy magazine photos, shallow interviews. But among them, one old headline stood out. Promising young lawyer disappears mysteriously after breakup with businessman Andrew Hale. Her heart raced. Could it be Clara? The date matched the time Andrew was building his empire. The article was vague, but enough to unsettle her. She felt she was digging into something deep and dangerous. Yet she couldn't pull away. It was as though fate was pushing her deeper into the mystery. The next day, Maggie arrived determined to confront him. She found Andrew in his office, staring out the window. "I read about Clara," she blurted. He turned slowly, his face unreadable, but his eyes carried a storm. "Don't say that name again." His voice was low, threatening, but also trembling. Maggie felt a flicker of fear, but also compassion. "Andrew, you can't just bury the past. It's still alive inside you." He stepped closer, tension in every movement. "And what exactly do you intend to do, Maggie? Save me." The sarcasm was there, but beneath it was a silent plea. She drew a steady breath. "No, but I can listen." For a few seconds, Andrew seemed to crumble. His eyes lost their hardness, his shoulders sagging, as if the weight had finally overtaken him. "It doesn't matter," he murmured. "Some stories only bring pain." Maggie moved closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Or they can bring healing, if you let them." He closed his eyes, as if that small kindness was too much to bear. The tension shattered when his phone rang sharply. Andrew answered immediately, his expression hardening into stone. "Understood. I'm on my way." He hung up without explanation. Maggie studied him, intrigued. "Business problems?" He only replied, "Too many secrets for you to handle." And he left in a rush, leaving her with the sense she was caught in something much bigger. Alone, Maggie dug further into the office. She found a folder of notes about anonymous donations to community centers, schools, and hospitals, all under unknown beneficiary. Slowly, Andrew's arrogant image began to unravel further. It was as if he lived in constant conflict between being admired and remaining invisible. When Andrew returned hours later, he looked even more worn down. Maggie risked a light comment. "You look like you fought the whole world." He fixed his gaze on her. "Sometimes, Maggie, that's exactly what happens." She realized he wasn't talking about business, but internal battles. For the first time, she wanted not just to investigate him, but to stand beside him. That night, as they said goodbye, Andrew murmured almost imperceptibly, "Don't get too involved, Maggie. You don't know what you're stepping into." She closed the door, but her heart pounded. It was clear, Andrew's secrets were heavier than she imagined. And even knowing the risk, she was already bound to the enigma that pulled her in deeper and deeper. Maggie woke that morning with a weight pressing on her chest. Andrew's warning still echoed in her mind. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." She knew she had crossed the line, but curiosity, and now something stronger, a thread of empathy and attraction, pulled her closer to him. It was like watching a volcano on the verge of eruption. At the office, the atmosphere was tenser than ever. Andrew seemed even more closed off, his answers reduced to single words, every gesture betraying an invisible exhaustion. Maggie tried to break the ice with light remarks, but he remained shielded. It was as though he had built his walls higher since their last conversation about Clara. That afternoon, during a short break, Maggie stepped into the building's lobby and found two men in suits whispering sharply to each other. They weren't staff, nor did they look like investors. The moment they noticed her presence, they went silent, but not before she caught one phrase. "He can't let that file leak." Her heart raced. Back at the apartment, she noticed Andrew sitting alone on the couch, staring into a glass of untouched whiskey. "Are you okay?" she ventured. He lifted his head slowly, his gray eyes darker than ever. "Depends on what you call okay." A shiver ran down her spine. It was like talking to someone losing a battle no one else could. "See, I overheard two men in the lobby talking about you, about a file." Andrew closed his eyes, drawing in a slow breath. "You need to stop listening to conversations that aren't yours." But his voice trembled, so unlike his usual steadiness. Maggie knew there was truth hidden under his icy layers. They sounded dangerous, Andrew. He set the glass aside, rising slowly. They're not dangerous to you. They're dangerous to me. Maggie folded her arms, unflinching. Then why are you fighting alone? What are you hiding from everyone, even me? He spun abruptly. Because trust is a luxury that already cost me too much. Clara proved that. The words escaped like a lightning strike. Maggie froze. So she betrayed you. Andrew let out a bitter laugh, empty of joy. Clara was the person I loved most, and the one who left me shattered when I needed her most. She abandoned me when she realized I wasn't just a man on the rise, but someone willing to take on enemies bigger than I could handle. He paced the room like a caged animal. Maggie absorbed each word as though piecing together a puzzle. She disappeared because she chose to walk away? Andrew stopped at the window, the city glowing behind him. She disappeared because someone convinced her I wasn't worth it. And maybe I never was. His voice cracked at the end. Maggie's chest tightened. He wasn't just cold. He was wounded. She stepped closer. Andrew, we all carry ghosts. But if you keep hiding, you'll let them win. His eyes hardened again. You talk like you know what it means to lose everything. She held his gaze. I know enough to recognize that pain in someone else. The silence stretched until Andrew finally exhaled heavily. Those men you overheard, they're tied to a rival company. They want to destroy what I've built, and they'll make up anything to do it. Maggie frowned. And the file? He hesitated. A document proving my anonymous donations. If it leaks, they'll twist it into something ugly. Suddenly it all made sense. The toys, the books, they were part of it, weren't they? You've been donating in secret. Andrew looked away but didn't deny it. People don't need my name to receive help. But my enemies want to turn kindness into scandal. For them, the truth never matters. The words shook Maggie. The man the world saw as arrogant and untouchable was, in reality, someone who hid in the shadows to avoid being destroyed again. Her heart pounded, and for the first time, she didn't just want to write a story, she wanted to protect him from becoming one. I won't let them do that to you. Andrew laughed, tinged with melancholy. And how exactly will you stop them, Maggie? Wave your pen at them. She lifted her chin. If I have to, yes. But I'm not just a journalist. I'm someone who believes the truth deserves to be told in full. He studied her quietly, as if weighing whether he could trust her. The moment broke when Andrew's phone rang. He answered, listening in silence, then hung up without a word. His face was grim. They're closer than I thought. Maybe even in this building. A chill ran through Maggie. For the first time, she realized that being involved with Andrew wasn't just emotional. It was dangerous. You should stay away from me, Andrew said, his voice low and heavy. You could still save your career, your peace. Maggie stepped closer. And leave you to face this alone? No, that's not how I work. He stared at her, incredulous. Why would you do that? She drew a deep breath. Because, no matter how hard you push me away, I already care about you. Andrew's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, then hardened again. Caring about me could be the most dangerous mistake of your life. Maggie's heart raced. Then let me decide if it's worth it. He turned his face, trying to keep his distance, but the barrier was already cracking. That night, Maggie could barely sleep. His words kept replaying in her mind. I don't trust anyone. Clara proved that. But part of her believed Andrew could learn to trust again. Maybe she was proof that not everyone would abandon him. That thought kept her awake, determined to stay. Across the hall, Andrew wasn't sleeping either. He paced the empty apartment, the untouched glass of whiskey still on the table. In his hands, Clara's folded letter lingered, a wound refusing to close. But this time, another face slipped into his memory, Maggie's, resolute, fearless, promising not to abandon him. It was too confusing to ignore. The next morning, when Maggie arrived, Andrew was different. Quieter than usual, but not cold. He seemed to watch her with a mixture of caution and gratitude. When she handed him the day's schedule, he murmured, "Thank you for not running yet." Maggie smirked. "I'm not that easy to scare off, Hale." But as they both adjusted to their uneasy partnership, a darker shadow loomed. The men in the lobby, the files, Andrew's secrets, all tangled into a dangerous web. Maggie didn't know it yet, but soon she would have to choose. Remain loyal to the truth as a journalist, or loyal to the man who was beginning to capture her heart. Maggie already knew working for Andrew Hale was anything but ordinary, but that week everything seemed to spiral out of control. The tension with his supposed rivals was growing, and with each step, she realized she was more entangled than she should be. Still, something kept her there, the sense that behind all his coldness, Andrew wasn't just hiding secrets, but wounds silently pleading for someone who could understand them. That on Tuesday morning, Andrew received a strange phone call. The voice on the other end sounded threatening. He hung up quickly, but Maggie noticed the sudden paleness in his face. "What happened?" she asked. He shook his head. "Nothing you need to worry about." But the way his hands trembled as he slipped the phone into his pocket gave him away. Determined to understand, Maggie decided to follow Andrew that night. She waited until he left alone, without his driver, and trailed him discreetly. He walked fast, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Maggie kept her distance until she saw him enter an old building in Brooklyn, a place far different from the polished spaces he usually inhabited. Inside, Andrew removed his coat and was welcomed by a group of children. Hiding behind the slightly open door, Maggie saw something she never imagined. The cold magnate kneeling down to talk with them, handing out notebooks, toys, and food. His gray eyes, usually so hard, glowed with tenderness that Maggie's heart pounded. Suddenly, everything made sense. The hidden toys, the mysterious files, the anonymous donations. Andrew was the invisible friend keeping that community center alive. He wasn't doing it for appearances. He believed in it quietly, sincerely. Tears welled in Maggie's eyes. He wasn't just an arrogant millionaire, but a man turning his pain into care. When Andrew left the building, Maggie quickly stepped back to avoid being seen. But as he returned to his car, he stopped abruptly, as if he had sensed her presence. "You can come out, Maggie," he said firmly. She froze. Slowly, she stepped into the light, her face flushed with shame. I just wanted to understand." Andrew stared at her for a long time, his eyes hardening again. "Understand what? That I'm not only the cruel man you imagine, that sometimes I do something useful." His voice carried bitterness, but also exhaustion. Maggie took a breath. "Understand that you hide from everyone, even yourself. But here, you're different." He looked away, heading toward the car. "That's exactly why I keep it secret. People don't need to see. When they do, they turn kindness into spectacle." Maggie moved closer. "But hiding doesn't erase the pain, Andrew. It only multiplies it." He froze, his body rigid, as if her words had struck too close to a fragile place. Back at the penthouse, the silence between them was deafening. Andrew poured himself whiskey, but left the glass untouched on the table. "You shouldn't have followed me," he muttered. Maggie, sitting across from him, kept her voice firm. "And you shouldn't carry all this alone. It's going to destroy you." He gave a humorless laugh. "Maybe it already has." Maggie seized the moment. "This is about Clara, isn't it? You still blame yourself." The glass nearly slipped from his hand. He stood suddenly, his eyes blazing. "Don't say her name." The air grew thick with tension, but Maggie didn't back down. "Andrew, not speaking it won't make her disappear. Silence is what keeps you trapped." For a moment, Andrew looked like he would explode, but instead collapsed onto the couch. "She was everything to me, and I failed. When I needed her most, I lost her." His voice cracked, low and raw, as if torn from him. Maggie sat beside him carefully. "Maybe you didn't fail. Maybe you were just human." He let out another laugh, this one almost a sob. "Humanity doesn't protect anyone, Maggie. Power protects. Money protects. I learned that too soon." She shook her head. "And yet, it's your humanity that keeps that center alive. Not your money, but the way you show up for those kids. That, Andrew, is what really defines you." Andrew stared at her, as though torn between hating her or thanking her for seeing what he tried so hard to bury. The intensity in his gaze made Maggie shiver, but she didn't look away. "Why do you hide behind coldness when the man I saw today is who you really are?" she asked. He exhaled deeply, as if he had no answer. "Because showing it makes me weak," he finally admitted. Maggie's heart tightened. "It's not weakness. It's strength. More than any boardroom or fortune could ever show." Andrew lowered his eyes, as though absorbing each word. It was the first time someone had disarmed him so easily, but the fragility didn't last. His phone rang again, and when he answered, his expression hardened into stone. Maggie only caught one phrase. "Don't touch her." Her blood ran cold. He hung up and slipped the phone into his pocket. "What happened?" she asked, panic in her voice. He drew a long breath. "It seems my enemies know you exist." A chill ran down Maggie's spine. "Me? But I have nothing to do with this war, Andrew." He stepped closer, his tone firm. "You do now, just by being near me." She swallowed hard. "So what are you going to do?" His reply was immediate. "Protect you, no matter the cost." The weight of his words left her breathless. Andrew Hale, the most guarded man she had ever met, had just made a vow that went beyond any contract. Her heart raced, but fear grew too. If his enemies were willing to use her presence as leverage, it meant the game had just turned more dangerous. Noticing the fear in her eyes, Andrew softened his voice. "I know I didn't ask you into this, but now I can't leave you alone." Maggie took a deep breath. "Then don't hide anything else from me. If we're in this together, I need the truth, Andrew. All of it." He hesitated, then gave a slow and in that moment. Maggie knew something far greater was surfacing. Andrew's secrets weren't only about Clara or hidden donations. There were real forces, real people determined to bring him down. And somehow, she had become part of the story, part of him. That night, before retreating, Andrew stood at the window of his penthouse, staring out at the city lights. Maggie watched him from a distance, trying to decipher the man caught between fortress and heart. She feared what was coming, yet she also felt the strange certainty that she wouldn't turn back. The masks were falling, and she was willing to see it all. Dawn brought little peace to Maggie. The city carried on as if nothing had changed, but inside her the feeling was clear. Something dark was approaching. Andrew's words from the night before echoed relentlessly. "My enemies know you exist." For the first time, Maggie felt her life no longer fully belonged to her. She was entangled in a web of secrets, danger, and a man who shook all her certainties. Andrew, on the other hand, carried himself with iron composure. Dressed in an immaculate suit, he acted as though nothing had shifted. But Maggie watched him closely, noticing the small cracks in his armor, the distracted gaze, the way his hands sometimes clenched the phone too tightly, the quiet sigh when he thought he was alone. He could fool the world, but not the woman, who was beginning to truly see him. That morning, Maggie found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. The paper was crumpled, the handwriting rushed. Inside was a single sentence: "Stay away from him before it's too late." Her heart raced. She ran to Andrew and showed him the note. He only glanced at it, his jaw tight. It was only a matter of time. The coldness of his reply did nothing to hide the worry in his eyes. "Andrew, this is serious. They're threatening me directly." He drew a deep breath. "I know, which is exactly why I want you to stay in my apartment. At least there you'll be safe." Maggie lifted her chin. "I'm not a bird you can lock in a cage." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "It's not a cage, Maggie. It's survival." Despite her fear, Maggie felt a strange warmth at the thought of how far he was willing to go to protect her. Still, a part of her resisted. "And who's going to protect you, Andrew?" He gave a half smile, but it never reached his eyes. "I've already learned how to protect myself." Deep down, Maggie knew it was just another wall. A wall ready to collapse. The newsroom. The pressure grew worse. Her editor-in-chief pressed for more details about Andrew. "You live in the same building. If you don't bring me something exclusive, you're off the next assignment." Maggie's throat tightened. Writing about Andrew would mean betraying his trust, but refusing would cost her career. The choice felt impossible. When she returned to the apartment, she found Andrew sitting on the balcony, the city stretching beneath his feet. He held a thick file in his hands. "These are the documents they want to use against me." Maggie stepped closer, hesitant. "Can I see?" He gave her a hard look, then relented. Inside were donation records, but also transfers that could be misinterpreted. The truth was there, but framed to look like crime. "They'll twist everything," Andrew muttered, his voice low. "They'll say every cent was money laundering." Maggie flipped through the pages, her pulse racing. "But it's clear here that the final destination is the community center. The evidence is all here." He gave a humorless laugh. "People believe headlines, Maggie, not reports." Maggie lifted her eyes to him. "Then we need to show the truth in a way they can't ignore." Andrew shook his head. "You still believe truth is enough?" She nodded firmly. "I believe that without it, we're nothing." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, Andrew had no immediate answer. He simply looked at her, as if seeing a hope he no longer owned. That night, over dinner, Maggie tried to lighten the air. "I never thought a millionaire could cook." Andrew arched a brow. "I never thought a journalist could be so hard to convince to stay safe." She laughed, and for the first time in days, the tension eased. But the calm didn't last. A loud thud in the hallway made them both rise instantly. Andrew rushed to the door, but no one was there. Only a box on the floor. Inside was a black and white photograph of Maggie entering the building. On the back, a message, "Final warning." Her blood ran cold. Andrew clenched the photo so hard the paper nearly tore. "They're playing with fire. Andrew, this has gone too far. We need to call the police." He shook his head. "We can't. They have contacts everywhere. It would only expose me further." Maggie felt her helplessness rise. "So what do we do?" "Just wait until they knock on our door again." Andrew closed his eyes briefly. "No, we strike first." The determination in his voice left Maggie torn between fear and admiration. "Strike how?" Andrew stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "I have information that could destroy my enemies. But to use it, I need someone who trusts me enough to expose it the right way." Her heart leapt. "You're saying you need me?" Andrew nodded slowly. "You're a journalist. You have the credibility I don't. If it's you who shows the truth, maybe the world will listen." Maggie drew a deep breath, her mind at war. It meant standing directly against his enemies and possibly losing everything. But when she met his gaze, she knew she couldn't turn away. "Then I'll do it," she said firmly. Andrew looked at her with an intensity that seemed to etch the moment into memory. "You have no idea what you're stepping into." Maggie lifted her chin. "Yes, I do, and I won't back down." For the first time, a flicker of vulnerability crossed his face, as though he finally believed he wasn't alone. The following days were filled with preparation. Maggie organized evidence, verified sources, connected the dots. Andrew provided documents, though he never looked entirely at ease. "If this falls into the wrong hands, it's over." Maggie only answered, "Trust me." He didn't say it, but she knew he was trusting her more than anyone since Clara died on Friday night. A storm swept over the city. Wind battered the windows, thunder split the sky. Maggie was alone in the apartment when she heard footsteps in the hall. Her pulse jumped. She opened the door cautiously. No one. Just another note slid under the door. "Last chance." She clutched the paper to her chest, fighting panic. When Andrew arrived and saw the note, his face darkened. "They want to break us with fear." He tore the paper into pieces and tossed it aside. Then he gripped Maggie's hands tightly. "I won't let them touch you. They'll have to go through me first." The firmness in his voice sent shivers down her spine. For the first time, she fully believed him. As the storm raged outside, the air inside the apartment was just as heavy. The closeness between them grew, every word carrying new weight. Maggie studied him quietly, realizing the cold millionaire no longer existed the same way. In his place stood a man willing to risk everything to protect someone who meant more to him than he dared admit. Deep down, Maggie knew the storm outside wasn't the only one. This was the storm of truth, of exposure, of the fight between what Andrew hid and what the world demanded to see. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. From that moment on, nothing would be the same. She was ready to face it all at his side, no matter the cost. Monday's dawn brought a heavy tension. Maggie woke with the sense that the day would define everything. Andrew was already up, pacing with his eyes fixed on the documents. "Today they'll make their move," he said, his voice steady but shadowed. Maggie's heart raced. She knew the battle for truth was about to begin, and there was no turning back. The newsroom, chaos reigned. Sensational headlines about Andrew spread everywhere, and everyone seemed hungry for more scandal. Maggie clutched the dossier in her hands. The editor-in-chief called her into his office. "This is your golden chance, Lane. Bring something that destroys this man once and for all." She drew a deep breath, knowing she would do the exact opposite. Meanwhile, Andrew faced emergency meetings with lawyers. His rivals had spread enough rumors to tarnish his reputation, but he didn't look shaken. Something in him had changed. For the first time, he wasn't worried about cleaning his name for society. He was worried about protecting Maggie, the only one who had dared to cross his walls. When night fell, the promised storm finally came. Lightning split the sky. The entire city seemed to hold its breath. Maggie was preparing to release her story, but she knew she couldn't do it alone. She decided to meet Andrew so they could face the consequences together. He welcomed her into his apartment, his gaze tired but filled with something new. Trust. Are you ready to lose everything? He asked, holding the papers that incriminated his enemies. Maggie gave a soft smile. If it's by your side, I'm not afraid. For a moment, Andrew was silent, absorbing her words. He was standing before the woman who had changed everything. The journalist who should have destroyed him had become the one who could save him. The doorbell rang suddenly, breaking the moment. Andrew frowned and opened cautiously. Two men in dark suits stood there, the same ones who had threatened them before. Hand over the documents. Hail, and there won't be any more problems. Andrew stepped in front of Maggie, his eyes blazing. Touch her, and you'll regret it. One of the men moved forward, but Maggie acted on instinct. She grabbed her phone, turned on the camera, and streamed live to the newspaper's internal server. You're being recorded, she announced, her voice steady despite her fear. The men recoiled, furious. Andrew seized the chance to throw the documents onto the table. Here is the truth, and the world will see it now. With trembling hands, Maggie sent the full story through the system, attaching the evidence Andrew had guarded in silence for so long. Within minutes, the file spread, mirrored across platforms. There was no stopping the truth from surfacing. Their enemies realized too late they had lost. The police arrived soon after, alerted by the broadcast. The two men were taken away, and the names behind the scheme began appearing in headlines. Andrew's rivals, those who had tried to destroy him to steal his empire. Maggie watched it all unfold with a mix of relief and disbelief. They had won, together, but when the commotion was over, Andrew collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. Maggie knelt beside him. Are you okay? He looked at her, his gray eyes softened. I've never been so close to losing everything. But somehow, you made me see that losing doesn't matter, not if I don't lose you. Maggie felt tears rising. Andrew, I never wanted to be part of this world of secrets and threats. But now that I am, I can't imagine leaving. Because, despite it all, this is where I found you. He cupped her face gently, as if she were the only thing that still made sense. And you are the only truth I want to live. The kiss came without warning, intense and urgent, as though the storm outside had spilled into that very moment. Maggie's heart burst in her chest while Andrew finally let all the masks fall. There was no cold magnate anymore, only a broken man finding redemption in her arms. Afterward, in the silence broken only by rain against the windows, Andrew rested his forehead against hers. You showed me I can still believe. I didn't know how to trust anyone anymore. But you came in, with all your courage, and forced me to see. Maggie smiled through tears. And you showed me that even the most unlikely stories can have a happy ending. In the days that followed, the truth spread. Andrew's name was cleared, and his enemies faced heavy charges. The public, who once condemned him, now marveled at the evidence of his anonymous generosity. But for him, none of it mattered as much as the simple fact that Maggie remained by his side. One evening, sitting together on the balcony, Andrew took her hand firmly. Do you believe in destiny, Maggie? She laughed softly. After everything we've been through, I think it would be impossible not to. He then opened a small box, revealing a simple ring, full of meaning. Then let me rewrite my destiny with you. Maggie gasped, tears flooding her eyes as she nodded, speechless. Andrew slid the ring onto her finger, and in that moment, all the weight of battles, threats, and fears seemed to dissolve. What remained was the silent promise of true love, built not on perfection, but on the courage to stay. The future was still uncertain, and they both knew it. But now they had each other, and that was enough. Maggie rested her head on his shoulder as Andrew whispered, No matter what comes, Maggie, you'll never be alone again. She smiled, letting peace wash over her. That night, as they lay down, Maggie thought of how it had all begun. A wrong door, a misunderstanding, and a frying pan that nearly changed their fates forever. And yet, it was precisely that absurd detail that made their story so unique. The mistake that revealed the most important truth of their lives. Andrew reflected too. The man who had lived for years behind walls of arrogance and silence had finally found someone who could see beyond them. Maggie had not only uncovered his secrets, but had taught him how to live with an open heart. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that love could heal even the deepest wounds. And so, under a rain that was beginning to fade, Maggie and Andrew sealed their new life. Not as suspicious neighbors, not as journalists, and magnate at war, but as two hearts that had chosen to stay. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the Beyond Fortune channel. Here, every tale is a reminder that true love can be found in the most unlikely places.